All right, so what are the benefits of goal setting? Like, why should you even bother to sit down and actually strategize for your goals, right? Well, of course, number one, it's going to provide structure and the purpose of your activities. It's very clear that when you have a goal and you know exactly what that is, it'll help you tailor what you should do and what you shouldn't do, right? So, for example, if you want to buy a house in 5 years and then you're driving along the way like, you know what, I think I want to buy a new car. Well, if you already know you want to buy a house, you know whether you should buy that car or not, right? Like, you know what, I want to buy a house in 5 years. I probably shouldn't buy a new car. That probably wouldn't be smart because I already have a goal of purchasing a house, and that's not in my list of steps, right? And then, of course, less stress and anxiety. Does anybody have any stress and anxiety in their life? Okay, do you need more stress and anxiety? Of course not, right? So of course, I know that sometimes when you set goals, sometimes putting pressure on yourself. Let's say you do want to buy a house in 5 years, right? And you have other people relying on you to buy this house in 5 years. That can add stress sometimes. But if you actually make sure you properly set your goals and have the proper steps to get to your goal, that can reduce stress and anxiety. No one needs extra stress in their life. Lord knows I don't. Okay, so of course, better concentration. Again, just making sure that when you have that specific goal refined, you know exactly what you're doing, what you need to do, and what you don't need to do to actually reach your goal. And then, of course, higher satisfaction when it comes to your personal life and your work life as well. Now, I'm sure people have already reached goals before, right? You ever reached one of your goals before? Right? Now, is there anybody here that celebrates when you reach a goal? No? Oh my God. I was about to say, please tell me somebody celebrates. Okay, how would you typically celebrate when you reach a goal? Just an example.
It depends on the goal. Like, if it was an academic goal or something, I might get together with some friends
Okay.
or something like that.
Okay.
Or if it was something like a personal goal or whatever, just depending on what it was,
Okay.
might celebrate differently.
Okay.
Best Buy.
Go to Best Buy.
Yeah.
Go to Best Buy. That's definitely one way to do it.
Yeah.
Buy something, of course. So, but celebrating sometimes can be the best part actually reaching that goal. Loves electronics, huh? Okay, so you might go get an iPad or something like that. Go celebrate. Okay, that makes sense. So, of course, after you reach that goal, that great satisfaction of reaching your goal and being able to celebrate with your friends, family, or celebrate by yourself if you want to. That's also something that you can actually reach, of course, if you take the chance of setting goals the proper way as well. All right, so we talked about SMART goals. You might want to write this down because what we're going to do is we're going to take the time to actually get one of your goals and actually break it down and build SMART goals out of some of the goals you have already. So SMART's a nice little acronym here, and this is what each one of your goals should be. Every time you set a goal, it should be a SMART goal. Of course, the first thing, it should be specific, right? Now, of course, what is specific? Well, we already talked about that initial goal of wanting to get ahead in life, and we already determined that getting ahead in life is not very specific, right? Now, if you want to get ahead in life, what does that mean to you? Maybe get ahead in life means you want to get a promotion. Maybe that means you want to move up when it comes to your income, your salary. Maybe getting ahead in life means not having to live paycheck to paycheck. Whatever that may mean to you, you want to be very specific on what that is. The reason why you want to be specific is because if you're not specific on what you're trying to get, and it becomes pretty ambiguous, it's hard to actually map out the steps to get to your goal because you're not exactly sure what that looks like. But the more specific you are on what that looks like, the easier it is to map out the steps to get what you want as far as your goal. You want to make sure it's measurable as well. Why do you want to make sure your goal is measurable?
Maybe something that's
Because you want to make sure it's
reachable.
reachable. You definitely want to make sure it's reachable. And
You can tell if you're getting close.
you also want to tell if you're getting closer right now, right? I mean, I don't know if there's anybody that does not, or that gets frustrated if you're not making progress, right? So if you can measure your goal, you can tell if you're making progress or not. Or if you've actually gone backward, then you can refine your steps to make sure you're going forward again. But if you can't measure it, then you have no earthly idea if you're getting there or not. So if you have a time limit, by the time you reach that time limit, then you're surprised, like, oh, I didn't reach my goal. How come I didn't know that before? Well, there was no way to measure if I was getting closer or further the whole time. So you want to make sure you're able to measure your goal as well. Of course, you want to make sure it's attainable, right? You want to make sure it's actually something that you actually have the resources to do, right? So for example, if I say, okay, so my goal is to win the Indy 500, well, probably I'm probably going to need a race car first, right? And I don't have that. I just don't have that, you know. So you want to make sure it's attainable. Also, you want to do this because if it's not attainable, you're actually setting yourself up for failure. Of course, you don't want to do that. You want to set yourself up for success, right? And then you want to make sure it's realistic. Are you really going to do what it takes to actually reach that goal, right? So I had a goal, for example, last year. I'll tell you, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to jog. Now, for me, that's not really realistic because I'm really not going to get up earlier than I have to go to work just so I can go jog. That's not realistic. Now, what is more realistic is maybe I'll do it at night, since I'm a night owl. Maybe I'll do that, right? So you have to be realistic with yourself as well. Will you really do what it takes once you've mapped out the steps to actually do that? And of course, that'll help you actually set a realistic goal so you're not letting yourself down as well. And then lastly, timely, which we already talked about. You want to make sure you have a time frame on that, of course. You want to make sure you're very specific with that time. We use the example with school, for example, right? If you just say, I'm going to go back to school. When? Right? And then sometimes people do that on purpose, right? You know, they kind of leave it open. They say, hey, aren't you going back to school? I'm going back to school. When? I'm going back to school. And they just leave it at that, right? But of course, you want to be very specific in what you say. I'm going back to school, and I'll be back there by January of 2012, right? So when you're very timely, it also helps you refine your steps on how to actually get to that goal, because if you have a year to actually get to your goal, that's going to look different versus if you had 3 years to get to your goal, right? And plus, it holds you accountable. If I know I need to be back in January, then now I have a date. But if I know, if there's no time limit to it, then I guess I'll do it sometime before I die, I guess, maybe. So, of course, you can be very timely with your goal as well. All of your goals should be SMART goals. Don't ever set another goal without making sure it meets this criteria. This will actually help you be able to reach that goal so you can be successful.